2008, I met my future husband in Ukraine. We married and we have 2 children now. My husband is Azerbaijani. He's from Fuzuli by origin. Hi, where are you? Shake your hand so everybody could see you. So he told me many stories about Armenian-Azerbaijan conflict, about occupied territories where almost nobody lives, about more than 1 million refugees and internally displaced persons, about the sufferings, about the risks, about the fears of people who are living in front line, about regular shootings and indifference of the international community. These stories always were moving me to the tears. And I also knew very well that with the collapse of the USSR, Nagorno-Karabakh conflict was not the only conflict. Transnistria, Abkhazia, South Ossetia, Tajikistan, Chechnya. But for me, it was somewhere very far from me. Somewhere in textbooks, in the news, in TV, in newspapers. And I'm originally from Lugansk region. It is Donbass. It is the eastern part of Ukraine. There we used to live, over there I was born, and there we gave birth to our children. And I couldn't even imagine that what my husband's homeland, Azerbaijan, has experienced and still continues to experience will affect my country, moreover, my region and my town. Ukraine has joined the list of post-Soviet conflicts. It is no longer somewhere far from me. It already touched my homeland and still concerns me directly. We moved to Baku, Azerbaijan. In this country, I saw how hard the country, Azerbaijan, is going through the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict. My parents also escaped from military operations in Donbass to Baku, to us. So now they're living with us in Baku. And about 1.7 million people like them are refugees and internally displaced persons from Lugansk and Donetsk region. Basically, they moved to the regions of Ukraine controlled by Kiev. During the conflict in Ukraine, more than 9,000 people were killed. After what happened in Ukraine, I have already started to be interested in other post-Soviet conflicts. Statistics just horrified me. Speaking about the Armenian-Azerbaijani conflict, more than 20,000 were killed. During the Transnistrian conflict, more than 1,000 people died. During the Abkhaz conflict, over 13,000 people were killed on both sides. More than 2,000 people died in South Ossetian conflict. The civil war in Tajikistan, which lasted more than 5 years, has become one of the most bloody conflicts in the territory of the former USSR since its collapse. According to this official data, because of the confrontation, more than 60,000 people were killed. Number of human lives lost in the course of the 2 Chechen wars is staggering. 160,000 people. And then I realized how naive we were, turning a blind eye to other conflicts that started before the military operations in Donbass. People may naturally think that if troubles doesn't happen to them or their loved ones, this is not of their concern and will never touch them. It is not right. No one is insured from the war. It is necessary to solve existing conflicts. Otherwise, it can arise in your country or your region. I could not imagine that in Ukraine, in a peaceful country, there could be a conflict, especially with Russia, it always considered a brother country. I would like to say to international community that all the conflicts in the former post-Soviet territory as well as in the world as a whole, should be treated in the same way, and the same rules of international law should apply to them. When a conflict is not resolved and turns into a protracted conflict, it triggers other countries. If you don't talk about this conflict and do not solve it on the basics of the norms of international law, you need to be prepared for the fact that this approach will be applied in the other parts of the world. It is also important that the norms of international law are not interpreted by different countries in their own interests. They should be interpreted as prescribed. There are clear definitions in the UN Charter, OC documents, and other international organizations on their priority for the principles of international law. All of them must be respected, and then we will avoid double standards. And what is important, avoid or reduce the risk of new conflicts in our region. The topic of our side event is rights of children. So I would like to say that more than that children and women and elderly people the most unprotected in military conflicts. Ensuring the safety of the child is the main factor that must be taken into account when making any decisions of international organizations regarding the conflict. Nothing is more important than children, especially when there is a threat of life. The conflict in the Donbass continues for the 4th year. According to UNICEF, and this is terrible statistic, more than 1 million children now this day need urgent humanitarian assistance, and this is almost twice as much as last year. This increase is due to ongoing fighting and the constant deterioration of living conditions in eastern Ukraine, where about 1.7 million people have moved to other regions of Ukraine. Many families have lost their sources of income and access to social assistance and health care, and the cost of living has increased dramatically. This situation is particularly acute for some 200,000 boys and girls living within 15 kilometers on both sides of the conflict line in eastern Ukraine, a line dividing the government's controlled and uncontrolled territories, and where the fighting is more intense. 19,000 children in this area are threatened to suffer from mines and unexploded ordnance, and 12,000 children live in areas that are under the fire at least once a month. Teachers, psychologists, and parents report signs of severe psychological stress in children, including nightmares, aggression, social isolation, and panic caused by loud sounds. Participation of children in combat requires special attention. This is prohibited by international law. Convention on the Rights of the Child, adopted in 1989, Article 38, regulates the rules on the involvement of children in armed conflict. It states that state participants shall take every possible measure to ensure that persons under the age of 15 do not take direct part in military actions. Analyzing the second paragraph of this article of the Convention, it should be noted that his language could be more stringent. After all, children are at war in the Donbass. They do fight for various reasons. Often they are attracted on an involuntary basis, but also there is the voluntary participation when children are fighting to get food or for revenge for their relatives who died. Children are our future. They cannot stand up for themselves. They can't take care of themselves. We cannot turn a blind eye to the problems of the weakest. It's not human. Even animals are willing to die themselves to save their babies. Is a human worse than animal? Watching the deaths and risks of children around the world from the hands of people like him in military conflicts. We must stop it, otherwise it will affect your child tomorrow. I don't want to blame here any particular country, and I don't want to talk about any single military conflict. I will speak on a global level. After all, there are a lot of conflicts in the world, and not only in the post-Soviet countries. We can watch it in Syria, Yemen, Iraq, etc. Let the super governments, the superpowers, stop dividing the zones of influence. And in this moment, the peace will come. I'm sure for this. And this is the solution of all frozen and active conflicts. Thank you so much.